In Generation 3, there are several moves that are only learned by a single Pokemon, and I was curious as to the respective power levels of these signature moves, so I decided to do a fun little tier list. Before we begin, I want you to know I'm ranking each move in consideration with the Pokemon who learns it. So if a move is strong in a vacuum, but the Pokemon who learns it doesn't really have the characteristics to take advantage of it, its ranking is going to reflect that. And we just went with 5 tiers here. We have Goated, among the greatest moves in the entire tier. Excellent, a defining characteristic. Some of these moves are going to be largely responsible for a Pokemon's overall viability in Generation 3 OU. Mid or possibly unexplored. These are more just kind of average moves that might have like rare competitive applications, and there might be room for additional development, but for the most part, the moves are probably just average. We'll soon see that there's a group of signature moves that, despite only being learned by a single Pokemon, there are just other moves that are strictly better. Oftentimes, the better moves are even learned by that very same Pokemon. And finally, trash. First up is Alakazam. Kinesis lowers the target's accuracy. I will tell you that there is talk right now of banning moves like this in Generation 3 OU. A lot of people want Sand Attack specifically to be banned because ninjas can often do some pretty non-fun and kind of like anti-competitive things. I'm just going to put this in trash. If you lower the opponent's accuracy, often they can switch out unless they only have one Pokemon remaining. But it's a very unfun mechanic, and there's quite a large portion of the community that thinks the tier would be a lot more fun if these moves were removed, and I consider myself to be a part of that group. Next up is Ariados with Spider Web, and it's a trapping move. It's just like Mean Look, but only Ariados happens to get Spider Web. And the concept of trapping is very, very prevalent and powerful in the tier overall. But Ariados doesn't really see any play whatsoever in Generation 3 OU, largely because of its stats. It's just very slow, very frail. Like, what is it really meant to do if it traps the opponent? It is a very, very strong move in a vacuum, like I mentioned earlier, but I'll say that maybe it's a little unexplored. A player stronger than myself might be able to find some sort of application. I've seen Ariados kind of go in and do some crazy things with Spiderweb Disable in like Draft League, but in Generation 3 OU, if you bring Ariados, this is probably the one thing that it would be trying to do, though I don't expect it to be doing a very good job. Next up is Beedrill Twineedle, and this is a move that Beedrill has had since Gen 1. In Gen 3, the way it works is it hits twice, it's got 25 base power, and you got a 20% chance to poison the target both times. It can break Substitute. Like, this thing is like, it's like a jack of all trades, but it's not even really a jack of all trades. It's like an 8 of all trades. The base power is just so low. There's other moves similar to this with higher base power, with slightly less added effects, but just the ability to like break Substitute and get an additional hit in can be very valuable, and there's going to be another move later on that we'll talk about. I would say that this is pretty much a strictly worse than other bug moves, and there's not even that many other bug moves in the tier. I'm mostly thinking about Mega Horn, and even Hidden Power Bug is probably often just more valuable than Twineedle, and also Beedrill is Beedrill. So Blaziken, we're going to notice that the Gen 3 starters all have their own signature move, which is really cool. Blaziken's isn't overly special. It kind of falls into this outclassed by other moves thing. Flamethrower just has more base power and 100% accuracy, and also has the 10% chance to burn. So all you're gaining by sacrificing 10 base power and 10% accuracy is a higher chance for a critical hit. And, I mean, maybe, but no. Okay, Castform. I still remember, like, grabbing this in one of my first Gen 3, like, casual playthroughs in, like, Pokemon Ruby. You get it from the Weather Institute, and like, I thought it was such a cool Pokemon back in the day. I'm gonna put it in mid, possibly underexplored. Here's what I'll say. If this thing had a sand form, that's like the one thing that's so insane, is that like Tyranitar comes in, permanent sand. They didn't create a sand form for Castform. But can you imagine if he comes in and then he turns into a rock type? Maybe that could be an actual thing. Pretty mid stats, obviously. But maybe like in Ubers, because Kyogre and Groudon are out and about. But just like, if you look at the move in and of itself, it becomes 100 base power, and this thing turns into that type, so it gets stab. So I don't know. I think the move is doing everything it can. It's doing a lot of heavy lifting. But the Pokemon it's on and the lack of permanent weather setting moves that actually synergize with it, it's probably somewhere in here, but I like Castform, so we're going to put it in the mid. He probably doesn't deserve to be mid, but I'm gonna call him mid. Exeggutor, Barrage, it's not even stab. Like, a lot of these signature moves are going to be like weak and hitting multiple times or have like some sort of like niche side effect. But at least it's stab, and this time it's not. It's just a normal move. Exeggutor has had it since Gen 1. It's not viable. I would put it in trash. In fact, I'm going to just put it in trash. It's like, it's so much worse than the other moves that are available that it's just going to go into trash for me. Hariyama Arm Thrust can just go into strictly worse than other moves. In Gen 3 OU, you're going to see Hariyama mostly just running Cross Chop. You could be running Focus Punch. It's almost always going to be running Knockoff if it's being brought to a Gen 3 OU game, and then coverage like HP Ghost or something. I just don't really see a world where you would want to run Arm Thrust over Cross Chop, or like maybe Brick Break if you don't want to deal with like the lower accuracy of Cross Chop. And that's the thing, is there's so many fighting type moves in the generation. Like some types like Ghost, Bug, even like Fire, there's just not a lot of different options. Fighting has like so many options. There's a lot of different fighting moves. A lot of them have interesting applications and see actual use in Gen 3 across a variety of Pokemon. This move is just not one of those moves. It's not really going to be seeing any play. And same goes for Hitmonlee. It's cool that you have a signature move. I'm happy for you, Hitmonlee, but the base power is not great. And 5% of the time, you're going to be the one taking damage, which is just like completely unacceptable. And it's going to be a deal breaker for me, dog. That's not what we're looking to do here. Hitmontop triple kick, it's like so close. If it was just a little bit better. Upon first glance, it looks like the base power is absolutely pitiful, but it explains here that of the 3 hits, the second one gets more powerful, the third one gets yet even stronger. So in the end, it's actually 60 base power, which is still just not great. If you look, whenever Hitmontop sees OU play, which isn't very often, he's looking at some other options here. And it's unfortunate that you've got a cool signature move and it's not really useful, but sadly that's kind of where we're at with it. Okay, finally we get to an actual great move. Jynx is fairly common in Gen 3 OU. Jynx is UUBL. It's a borderline Pokemon, but it sees some use as a lead, an aggressive lead in Gen 3. You can do a lot of interesting things with Jynx. You can lead and try to trade with opponent Tyranitar by Ice Beaming. You die to their Rock Slide, and then you have a Dugtrio in the back to trap them, eliminate Tar, and then you can clear Weather. But Jynx has more going for it than just that because, in large part because of Lovely Kiss. You have an aggressive lead here that can, Calm Mind and has like a strong stab Ice Beam, but you can also put the opponent to sleep. And 75%, I mean, that's not awful. There are, worse ways to try to put the opponent to sleep, like Hypnosis, much worse, Sing, much worse. So, 3/4 of the time you're hitting this Lovely Kiss, and Jynx is the only Pokemon that has this particular sleep move. And without this, I don't think Jynx would be nearly as viable as an aggressive lead. So this is an absolutely defining characteristic of Jynx. All right, for Marowak actually has 3 separate bone-related moves that are all signature moves. Nobody else learns these. So let's take a look at all of them. Bone Club. This one, 65 base power, only 85% accurate, and you can make the opponent flinch. Very incredibly underwhelming. Keep in mind, we learn Earthquake, which is 100% accurate, has 100 base power. And also, your speed is 45. You can't make the opponent flinch unless you're acting first. So, unless you're on like a para-spam team or something, or maybe you've been past speed with a Ninjask or agility, Baton Pass Zapdos, but even then, like, you're not going to be clicking Bone Club. I promise you, you're not going to be clicking Bone Club. Will you be clicking Bone Rush? Also probably not. It's one of those moves that hits multiple times, has low base power, though higher than some of the other ones we've seen, I think. Still only 80% accurate. The best one, in my opinion, and this actually does get seen on occasion, is Bonemerang. You're giving up 10% accuracy when compared to Earthquake, but it hits twice, so if you hit, it does have the same effective base power as Earthquake, but because it has 2 hits, you can break Substitute. That gives it a niche application, and I'm going to put it in mid / possibly unexplored. I don't think it's always a part of the Marowak moveset when it's seen in OU. You see here, like, the Smogon page is recommending either Bonemerang or Earthquake. You definitely wouldn't run both. But if you're the kind of gamer that can live with a 90% accurate move when a 100% one is sitting there waiting for you, this has a little bit of an upside if the opponent happens to have a sub. And we're back to great moves. Miltank just has Milk Drink. Recovery is fairly scarce in Gen 3. You know, like, what has Recover? Like, Celebi, Blissey has Soft Boiled, Melodic has Recover. There's some Pokemon like Medi that are like really frail and offensively oriented that technically get Recover but almost never use it. But Pokemon, especially ones that have a little bit of bulk, if they have actual recovery, they don't need to rely on, you know, wish support from another Pokemon or like rest with aromatherapy. Like, this kind of longevity is a defining characteristic of Miltank. Miltank is not seen very often in OU. It is UUBL. I've seen players like Band Manaphy do some crazy things with Miltank in tournament. I think that the Pokemon is probably a little unexplored, but the move is fantastic, and this ability for Miltank to heal itself it's largely why Miltank can even be in the conversation to be viable whatsoever. Persian Payday, this is just like a single player cartridge game, like in-game mechanic where you can get additional money if you use it in battle. So that's the thing, is like a lot of these moves are made of varying power levels so that you can get them over the course of a single player experience. Like, they weren't designing all these moves with the competitive metagame in mind, and Payday definitely falls into that category, unfortunately for Persian. Now, I don't know why the resource I was using to like capture all these photos used Porygon rather than Porygon 2, but we're talking about Porygon and Porygon 2, of course, here. And Porygon, like Marowak, has 3 signature moves. Let's take a look. First is Conversion. Conversion, you change the type to match the type of one of your own moves at random, but not either of its current types. I don't know, man. Like, I'm going to spend an entire turn manually changing my type to like some other random type so I can switch my stab up or something. That's like a whole turn of setup for like not like that much benefit. You know, like some Pokemon like Agility, and now they're faster than the entire metagame, or a Pokemon might Swords Dance and now it can one-shot like almost everything on the opponent's team. To spend an entire turn just so you can like maybe get stab on a certain move on a Pokemon that's like kind of underwhelming and mostly is carried by its ability in Trace, not that compelling. Conversion 2, now we're changing our type to match a type that resists or is immune to the type of the last move used against the user. In doing a little bit of research for this, I was wondering, like, because like, what is Porygon 2 used for in ADV OU? You counter trap enemy Doug Trio for the most part, right? You can eliminate Doug, and then you can empower Pokemon that are weak to Doug, like your Raikou or whatever, right? And some people have done some like weird stuff. I made a different video on this about a player who had a Porygon 2 set that trapped opponent's Doug, but had like Recycle and a certain berry that allowed it to basically get like full, like max stats in every single stat. It was +4 in attack, defense, special attack, speed, etc. And I was wondering, like, could you bring Porygon 2 in, take an Earthquake, recover, and then Conversion 2 to become a type that resists ground? And like, could you do something with the, I don't know. Probably not. Maybe somebody could think of an application for this, because a lot of the time, like the ideal line to take with Porygon is to recover stall Doug Trio's Earthquake so that you kill the Doug after it is struggling, so that but after you kill the Doug, you have the most health left. So maybe Conversion 2 could be a way to more safely reach that end, because if Doug gets 2 Earthquake crits in a row, you just die and you lose, and then the Doug is still alive and you didn't actually successfully trap the Doug. So that's the only thing off the top of my head. I don't even know if that would work, but that's the only thing I can really think of. And the last thing is Sharpen, and it just increases your attack by 1 stage. So it's got to be in one of like the bottom 2 here, just because of the Conversion 2. Maybe there's a world where there's some application here. And keep in mind, like, Trace has like so many different applications. So like, this isn't only like, this, maybe it wouldn't only be useful against Doug, but who knows, maybe one of you guys will think of something and you'll make a team and I'll cover it on the channel someday. Next up is Pikachu, and keep in mind, Raichu also learns this signature move in Volt Tackle. I'm going to go ahead and throw this into an excellent defining characteristic. Volt Tackle is basically Double Edge, but electric. It's 100% accurate, 120 base power, which is phenomenal. Moves like this are very, very rare in ADV OU. Like, there's Double Edge, but if you think of like most other moves that get to this base power, like the accuracy isn't going to be there. There's some sort of drawback. And here the drawback is you're losing a lot of your health. Keep in mind, Pikachu's special attack is double when it holds Light Ball. So for the most part, if you're bringing either of these, it's probably going to be Pikachu because its special attack stat is going to be absolutely insane. But yeah, attacks of this kind of base power that will hit every single time, very, very tough to come by. I've seen H-Clat use a Pikachu in tournament to basically one-shot an entire Suicune. And it was all thanks to Volt Tackle. So Light Ball and Volt Tackle actually give Pikachu the ability to do things that are surprisingly useful in Gen 3 OU. And I think a lot of people would be surprised to see just how much damage this thing can do if it's somehow able to hit the field and get an attack off before it dies. And the cool thing is Pikachu actually has some speed. So you can get it positioned to click this big button and something's going to have to take it. Jirachi Doom Desire. This is perhaps the best Pokemon in the format that actually has a signature move. We haven't seen very many OU Pokemon thus far. In fact, Jynx is UUBL, Miltank is UUBL. Marowak is, I think, also UUBL. Hariyama is UUBL. I think this is the first full-fledged OU Pokemon, and I think that says a little bit about like the foresight of the developers. When they were creating stronger Pokemon with like higher base stat totals, I think they gave them like shallower move pools for the most part. For Jirachi, they gave it Doom Desire. How about that? I'm going to throw it in mid, possibly unexplored. It's kind of like Future Sight, but Steel and like a higher base power and also like might miss. I think Future Sight also sometimes misses, but typeless damage cannot be a critical hit. And the interesting thing is the damage is calculated against the target on use. So if you're in front of a Blissey when you use the Doom Desire, whatever takes that Doom Desire is going to take an enormous amount of damage. Friend of the channel, Tetrafolium, released a video talking about Jirachi and a Doom Desire set. I'll link it in the description. I think it's very unexplored. I think, strong players have probably taken a look at it. I think you could really catch your opponent off guard with this kind of a style. And there's not a lot of moves like that in this generation. So it would be something interesting to build around and to think about. Now, since Gen 1, Raticate has gotten 2 separate signature moves. First one, Hyper Fang. 80 base power, fine. Not amazing. 90% accuracy, and we might make the opponent flinch. We actually have some speed. We have a little bit of speed, so we can outspeed things. We can go for flinches. I think that's pretty underwhelming. And then Super Fang basically halves the target's HP, which is interesting. I don't think there's really anything else like this move through the first 3 generations. And I'll be honest, I can't really think of a lot of applications for something like that, like halving the opponent's health. Like maybe there's like a really bulky Pokemon that's gotten out of control, like maybe somehow you let a Snorlax get off like one too many curses and none of your Pokemon can 2-hit KO it. But at that point, you also have to reckon with the fact that you brought a Raticate to a Gen 3 OU match and you allowed a Snorlax to get out of control. I think I probably it's got to be one of these two. But just because I think Hyper Fang isn't like that outclassed by that many other normal type moves. Like you're normally going to be wanting to run something like Body Slam or Double Edge. But Hyper Fang is somewhat close to being as valuable as Body Slam. You're missing out on accuracy and base power, and you're going for flinches instead of paralysis. So I think Body Slam is considerably better, but it's considerably better by virtue of being a little better in like 3 separate ways. So I wouldn't call it trash, but it's trash adjacent. Alright, Sceptile, we've gotten to another one of the Gen 3 starters. I really like this Pokemon. I want it to be good. I want to explore it more soon. It's a Pokemon that's on my radar to try to build with in the near future. Leaf Blade isn't great. It has a higher chance to go for a critical hit, much like Blaze Kick, and unlike Blaze Kick, it's a little bit worse in terms of power, but it cannot miss. The good thing about Leaf Blade is it just allows Sceptile to have a somewhat respectable stab move without having to run like Giga Drain, which allows it to run Hidden Power. So you can have coverage like HP Ice or HP Fire, and you can also run your Leaf Blade. Like Celebi kind of has to run Giga Drain if it wants to run something like HP Fire, right? And Giga Drain, yeah, the healing is nice, but the base power is very low, and it really limits you offensively. 70 base power isn't that much better, but it is appreciated. And, you know, the additional critical hit chance, that's nice. If this was a little bit stronger, this is honestly a big part of why Sceptile is not considered to be very viable in OU. Jimothy has a very good video on Sceptile and how, because of its base stats and the base power of Leaf Blade, it just ends up missing out on a lot of like critical like damage thresholds, and it needs a lot of support. I'm gonna throw it in mid / possibly unexplored because it's not, unlike Blaziken, like Blaziken gets Flamethrower, right? And that just outclasses Blaze Kick. This is just strictly Sceptile's like strongest grass stab that it gets. And it empowers it to gain additional coverage with Hidden Power without having to use Giga Drain. I'm gonna be real. I have nothing against Seviper. I wouldn't call myself much of a Seviper fan. And this is one of the only moves on the whole list that I had to like look up. And I brought them all up mostly for your guys' benefit, but I did not know what the hell Poison Tail did. If you asked me this, I would have told you that's not even a move. But it's got a poison chance, high chance for critical hit, 50 base power. Surely this thing learns Sludge Bomb, and it does. It simply does. And it's going to be running Sludge Bomb. So yeah, again, congrats on your signature move. Run Sludge Bomb. Slacking, one of the coolest Pokemon in all of Pokemon, in my opinion, especially in Gen 3 OU. Very interesting, aggressive lead. Obviously, with its base stat total and its ability, it's just a very unusual and unique Pokemon where once every time it comes in, it's going to click a huge move and something's going to take a lot of damage. But then that's it. It's got to switch out or it's going to Truant. The thing, and for that reason, you're going to be running Choice Band, and Slacking is crazy. You probably know a lot about why Slacking is sick. It gets healing, much in the same way that Miltank did. But I have never seen a Slacking run Slack Off. And the thing about Slacking in Gen 3 OU is that you're going to be running Choice Band, right? You're going to be stepping on spikes. You're going to be taking Sand Chip. So over the course of a battle, Slacking is going to be slowly getting chipped down, and eventually it's going to die. And it doesn't really find the time to click Slack Off. But I was just thinking, I feel like you could chuck this onto a moveset, because especially if the opponent has a Pokemon with Protect, oftentimes if they have Protect, they're just going to click it to scout what you're doing, and then you have to Truant the following turn. So it basically completely nullifies Slacking. But if you have Slack Off, you could heal while they Protect, and then you still have to switch somewhere else, like you're likely to lose momentum. But that could allow Slacking to potentially have a bit more longevity. And again, I've never seen it. Slacking is somewhat rare as it is. It's not unheard of. Like, there are established teams. Blues Energy was known to, at one point in time, gain the highest elo ever at the time in Gen 3 OU with a team that had famously Slacking and Blastoise of all Pokemon. But for those that have experimented with Slacking, I would be curious to see if they've thought of Slack Off, and just the fact that oftentimes your opponent is going to be switching when you bring the Slacking in because it outspeeds most Pokemon with its strong base stat total of 100. And they're trying to pivot around your coverage. They're trying to make sure that, they have the right Pokemon coming in to take this Focus Punch or a huge Shadow Ball or Double Edge or something like that, right? So if they're switching or if they're clicking Protect, just chucking Slack Off, you're going to lose a little bit of coverage. But it could allow Slacking to stick around a lot longer, and it could make your opponent think twice about how they're going to deal with the Slacking. So I'm going to put this into possibly unexplored. But maybe there's a world where somebody could build around this concept, and all of a sudden this Pokemon that's only supposed to be able to click a big button a small number of times, now all of a sudden it has longevity, and there's additional mind games there. I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comments. Smeargle, Sketch, Goat. You might think, like, does it really count? Like, can you say that it's like the greatest move when it's really just the ability to copy other moves? Yes. Obviously, Smeargle is the only Pokemon that knows Sketch, which, by virtue of knowing Sketch, it knows every single move in the entire tier, in the entire game, which is why it is as viable as it is, which is somewhat viable. Much like Slacking, it is usually seen in the lead slot. It's usually associated with hyper offense teams. You learn Spore, which is a move that I think only Parasect and Breloom learn, which is 100% accurate sleep. And that's just fantastic. Like, there's nothing the opponent can do about it unless they have a solid sleep sack, or if they have a Pokemon with Lumberry or something. And a lot of teams, you know, can't afford to run Pokemon like that. Some teams, they might not have a great sleep sack, and they might have, you know, a disfavorable matchup into lead Smeargle. So Smeargle can catch the opponent off guard. You can learn Spikes, which is arguably the best move in the game. And not that many Pokemon get Spikes, and many of the Pokemon that get Spikes are awful. So just the fact that Smeargle is like somewhat respectable, just because it can put something to sleep and spike on the turn that the opponent has to switch and get a Pokemon in front of Smeargle that can actually act. There's just endless possibilities. There's been, you know, many videos about Smeargle. There's many different teams that have been built around the concept of Smeargle. Smeargle can just win on turn 1. It can Spore something and then Dragon Dance, Baton Pass, Dragon Dance setups to sweepers. Things can get like very out of control very fast. And if you're not experienced at dealing and or like navigating around Smeargle and trying to mitigate what it could be doing, you can fall behind very quickly. And that's exactly what Smeargle teams want to do. They want to get ahead. They want to surprise you. And it can have anything at any time. So Sketch is any Pokemon that could learn this move would instantly be 5 million times as viable as it already is. Like, I don't know. Imagine if Sceptile learned Sketch. Like, all of a sudden, Sceptile is like probably like banned to Ubers. So just by definition, I think it has to go in the goated tier. Much like the Porygon picture, I don't know why Staryu is here rather than Starmie, but we're talking about Starmie learning Camouflage, which is another move that like I'm aware of, but like it just does not get used. The user's type changes based on the battle terrain, which is just normal type when Wi-Fi battles are being played, apparently, in Gen 3. So it really does nothing. It turns you into a normal type Pokemon. Maybe if you're trying to avoid being Pursuit trapped by Tyranitar and you don't want Pursuit to be super effective. But in that case, I don't know, man. Just like do something else. I'm going to call this trash. It's pretty trash. Okay, and finally, we're at the final Gen 3 starter. It's Swampert and Muddy Water. And this is very similar to Blaziken's Blaze Kick, but the base power is quite a bit better. It's the same as Surf, actually, so you're not actually missing out on any power anymore. Your accuracy has gone down, but the cool thing is you have a 30% chance to lower your opponent's accuracy. And of all of the like ways to increase your own evasion and or lower the opponent's accuracy, to me, this is one of the least immoral ones, because at least there's a decent shot that you'll miss your entire move and get no value whatsoever. I legitimately think it is probably about as good as Leaf Blade. It's clearly better than Blaze Kick. I mean, that's a pretty serious upside for Muddy Water. And it has the same, you know, chance to hit as Fire Blast, and every Pokemon under the sun runs Fire Blast, like Mixtar, Mixbents, freaking Charizard, Moltres. Everything's running Fire Blast. People are like okay living with 85% accuracy when the upside is there, and this is a move with like considerable upside. So I would say that this is unexplored. I think I've seen one person running this on the ladder, and I got a chuckle out of it. But if you can simply just hit your move, it is better Surf. So you know, maybe there is room for like a Muddy Water Swampert to try to do things. Okay, and finally, Volbeat with Tail Glow. This is a very interesting Pokemon and a very interesting move. I was talking about this on my stream recently because I only kind of knew that this was a thing. There is a move in Gen 3 that raises your special attack by 2 stages. Of course, Swords Dance Celebi, Baton Passing attack stacks to things like Aerodactyl or, you know, various other offensive threats. That's very common. Everybody knows about that in Gen 3 OU. And I was wondering, you know, this is a move. Like, Smeargle could learn Tail Glow. There's a move that, like, raises your special attack by 2 stages as well. And so why don't people do it? Well, Volbeat is Volbeat. And you have some speed. You're not very bulky. Bug, not the greatest typing in a tier partially defined by Rock Spam, right? Volbeat does get Baton Pass. It's not, like, in this set. Is it in the PU set? NU? Yeah, look, there we go. Tail Glow Pass. This is a thing in NU. All my NU fans, let me know how often you see this set in the Gen 3 NU tier. Now, the reason that you won't see this either on Volbeat or on Smeargle in Gen 3 as often is just because Blissey exists. Swords Dance Pass is much more difficult to deal with. Like, the best physical walls in the tier are Swampert and Skarmory. They're better at different things, but in general, those are the 2 most difficult Pokemon to break if you're a physical attacker. But, you know, if you're Metagross, for example, and you get a crit Choice Band Meteor Mash into Attack Raise, like, all of a sudden, like, you're 1 or 2 more hits away from, like, just punching all the way through that Skarmory or all the way through that Swampert. Comparatively, Blissey, like, you could have, like, you could be, like, fully calm-minded out of your mind. Suicune, like, +6/+6, and, like, nothing is gonna one-shot it with a special attack. Like, Suicune, like, +6 calm mind Surf does not one-shot Blissey. So, like, just, like, the presence of Blissey, the fact that it exists, just Tail Glow as a concept and passing special attack stacks it's just considerably less viable. And a lot of the Pokemon that are going to try to push through Blissey via Calm Minding to Infinity and beyond anyway, they have Calm Mind, which also gives them special defense, which is critical because oftentimes Blissey is going to be Ice Beaming or Thunderbolting those Pokemon. I am going to put it in mid to possibly underexplored. I think there could be a world where if you run Doug and you're able to eliminate Blissey, maybe you have a Volbeat or a Smeargle in the back. Smeargle comes in at some point somehow and spores something, Tail Glows, Baton Passes, and now the opponent doesn't really have a special wall to stop a +2 Gengar or a +2 Charizard from just kind of like one-shotting everything. Who knows? By the way, when I was preparing for this, there was one move in particular that I was really excited to talk about, and we have not talked about it. And that move is Meteor Mash. And, you know, what can we say about Meteor Mash? We could say a lot of things about it, but I won't be doing that in this video, and that's because if you scroll down, how many of you can honestly tell me that you knew that Clefable could learn Meteor Mash in Gen 3? I had absolutely no idea. 70 attack. But yeah, pretty interesting distribution. There's not that much trash, and there's not that much greatness in terms of the signature moves. For the most part, they're kind of niche, mostly like throwaway moves to make Pokemon more interesting for the single-player cartridge experience, I think. But there's, you know, a couple that definitely define these Pokemon. And if you were to, you know, relax the definition of a signature move a little bit, you know, the Metagross Meteor Mash would be showing up, probably, honestly, in the goated tier. But alas, that's not what we were here to talk about today. Thanks for watching. Sub to make sure you don't miss my next video. And let me know what I should do next. Join my Discord, you know, do all those things. And I will see you next time.